welcome to another episode of Los Banos Talk. My name is Justin Collins. Tonight we're going to talk about an interesting development in the Los Banos Mayor Election 2020, right after a brief message from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Sherry Pearson, owner of Pearson's Jewelers in downtown Los Banos. Right now, while supplies last, we are offering buy one, get one half off on Caroline Rocha classic bracelets. Buy one for yourself and give the other as a Christmas present, or keep them both, or give them both away. Caroline Rocha grew up in our area in Gustine. She designs each bracelet herself, making them a unique piece of art. These bracelets are made from genuine leather, crystals, hand-painted, and signed on the back. Hurry and get yours today. We are still open during the Purple Tier and are located at 9286 6th Street in downtown Los Banos. See you soon.
Welcome back, everyone. Again, my name is Justin Collins. If you haven't already, please like, follow, subscribe to Los Banos Talk. We have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and losbanostalk.com. You can also sign up for the free newsletter and receive free articles sent directly to your email, or you can check them out on our website, losbanostalk.com. And now for tonight's news. So as they say, it's not over till it's over. This election's been really interesting and has been ridiculously close. In fact, the difference between the two candidates is only 32 votes. And considering a lot of people have complained that the county took a long time to get through the ballots, considering that there's been people who've come forward and saying that their ballot was received but not yet accepted according to their ballot tracks tracker, and that there's been numerous reports of people claiming that maybe they think that their vote wasn't necessarily counted, there's been an ask for a recount. And so I want to let people understand something first of all. If a recount happens, right, no new votes are going to just show up. But essentially what would happen is that you're going to count again the votes that are already present and simply make sure that they're counted correctly. Now, some people might say that, oh, that's a waste of time, blah, 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 but not really. If we look back to George Bush v. Al Gore, every time they did a recount, Gore gained about 200 votes, and initially it started out with them being only about 600 votes apart. I've never heard of an election and where there wasn't a recount and the votes didn't change by at least a few. There is a high possibility of margin of error, and considering the fact that the county was like swamped and this election had such a high voter turnout and there was such high pressure on them to get out the results, and at first they started doing pretty good with getting the votes counted, but then in the last week or so it really slowed down and petered out. Now, with all that being said, it does draw some question as to, well, could there have been an error? When we're talking only 32 votes out of over 13,000, a few mistakes here and there could be enough to change the outcome of the election. And so it's very possible that a recount could change it. If there was ever an example of a time when I would say that a recount is appropriate or makes sense, this is that. And it's not simply because you're trying to overturn the results of the election. Really, you're respecting democracy, because you're just simply trying to see however people truly voted is respected and counted, and that every vote is counted. So with that being said, Paul Llanez did file for an election recount. He filed the paperwork today, and it's believed to be starting by December 3rd. Now, I'm not entirely sure on the full process of this, but basically what I understand is this. The candidate is basically on the hook to pay for the recount. If the amount is something reasonable that Paul can afford, like $5,000 to $10,000, he's going to pay for it himself. If it goes beyond that or ends up being some kind of astronomical amount, then he's going to leave it up to the PAC and see if they're willing to pay for it. If the county does a recount and it turns out that it changed the results of the election, in other words, if after the recount now Paul is the winner, then Paul would actually get a refund for the amount he put in. However, if the results don't change, and by that I mean he's not the winner, Tom is still the winner, then he would not get that money back to him and he would be out that money to the county. Now, it's entirely possible that a recount could overturn the results of the initial election, and nothing's been certified yet. At 32 votes, again, out of 13,000, it's entirely possible that there could be enough error in which it changes the result of the election. What would be interesting is that if it did change the results of the election, and if Paul now became the front runner, would conversely Tom Faria asked for a recount as well and challenge it. If, however, Paul asks for a recount and then Tom Faria is still the winner, I think at this point you could easily safely say that yes, Tom did in fact win for sure. Whether you support Paul or whether you support Tom, I honestly think that you should support this recount, or at least, if nothing else, not criticize it too much. Because the money's not coming from the taxpayers, unless it alters the results of the election, in which case you should let the chips fall where they fall and we should respect democracy. If, however, it doesn't change the results of the election, then you can really be rest assured that Tom Faria did in fact really win, and this was verified and checked twice essentially. Normally I'm not super in favor of recounts all the time, but in this particular case they're only 32 votes apart. I think it's more than reasonable to ask for a recount in this particular case. And in a way, even if you're a Tom supporter and you're thinking to yourself you don't like this because there's the possibility that he could lose, I can totally understand that. But considering that there's only 32 vote difference, I still think the recount is a pretty good idea, because if it does turn out that Tom still won after all this is said and done, this further solidifies the legitimacy of his win. Then no one can say, oh, he only won due to a few votes and it was really, really close and it might have just been a mistake or error. Who knows? By Paul doing this recount, it will essentially accomplish one of two things. Either A, it'll change the result of the election, and then we'll have to Paul, in which case this would be the new legitimate result of the election, when all hands and eyes could just be focused on this one particular election as opposed to doing the whole county, and make up for error and truly respect democracy. Or Tom still wins the election and we can rule that thought process totally out, and no one can say, no Paul supporter can say Tom didn't fairly win, or they can't say that Tom didn't, whatever. Anybody who truly respects democratic process, democracy, or votes should really never be opposed to simply counting all the ballots, which all this is simply doing is saying, let's count it again because it was so close. It was a huge debacle. You guys were overrun and short-staffed. The margin of error you could cut with a butter knife. And now that you're just looking at this one particular race, there's a possibility that there were enough errors that it could have changed the election one way or another. If the difference was like 200, 300, 400 votes, I would say, yeah, no reason to do some kind of recount. But with 32 votes being the deciding factor, yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to do this. And again, he's actually on the hook for this financially. If it doesn't pan out, then he's out that money. If, however, though, it does change, then he gets refunded, at which point I guess that would mean the taxpayers have paid for it. But before you give Paul a hard time about doing something with the election process that could ultimately charge the taxpayers something, let me remind you this. Neither candidate can really say that they put the taxpayers first in this particular incident with this particular election, because Tom Faria had 2 years left on his term as city council, and there's now a possibility that that seat will go to a special election costing the city anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, as opposed to just waiting 2 years and then running at the end of his term. In this case, Paul also could end up costing taxpayers money, but it would be county-wide as opposed to just the city. And there's also the possibility that instead he actually just paid into revenue for the county government. But if it does alter the election result, then yes, the taxpayers ultimately would be on hook for it. That being said, democracy does have some cost, and there was a cost with just running the election in the first place. In other words, regardless of however this pans out, if it turns out that Paul is the winner of the election, then taxpayers would be on the hook for paying the bill that it costs to do the recount at a county level. However, if Tom remains the winner, then the city is likely going to be on the hook to fund a special election to replace his seat for the remainder of 2 years. So either way, taxpayers are going to be on the hook to fund some kind of election, whether you like it or not. There's only one possible outcome in which taxpayers will not be on the hook for anything, and that would be if Paul Llanez loses the recount, and then Tom's old seat is decided by the council and is appointed, and there is no special election. This is the only scenario in which taxpayers don't have to pay anything necessarily. Any other possible outcome from this will result in someone paying something, and that someone being us. So before everyone starts complaining about the potential cost of this recount to the taxpayers, I just want you to know that it's not necessarily a guarantee. The taxpayers may not necessarily have to pay it. And also, it could easily be said both ways. Tom Faria's decision to run for mayor in the middle of his city council term is likely to cost the city between $50,000 to $100,000, And conversely, it's possible that Paul Llanez's recount might also cost the county amount of money. But I really don't know how much that is yet because I haven't received any kind of estimates. And my understanding is it costs per day. And so really, I guess we wouldn't know what the bill is until it's over. Thank you for listening to another episode of Los Banos Talk. My name is Justin Collins. If you haven't already, please like, follow, subscribe to Los Banos Talk. We have YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and losbanostalk.com. You can subscribe to the free newsletter by putting your email address in at the bottom of the website and get free articles sent directly to your email and notifications when I post a new blog post. Los Banos Talk is completely free and paid for sponsorships from local advertisers. Los Banos Talk brings the news and information you need free of charge. Once again, my name is Justin Collins, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.